My name is Priya. I'm 26 years old. And this is how I took revenge on the roommate who humiliated me for how I speak. It happened on a Saturday night. The apartment buzzing with people. Music playing. Red Solo cups in hand. Priya had just come home from a late library shift. Exhausted. Balancing takeout and her laptop bag. She wasn't expecting guests. She certainly wasn't expecting what she saw next. She turned the corner into the kitchen and froze. There, standing in front of half a dozen laughing guests, was Lindsay, her blonde, overly confident roommate, doing a full-on impersonation of Priya, bobbing her head, twisting her hands in mock prayer, and saying in a thick, butchered version of Priya's Indian accent, "Hello, my name is Priya. Would you like some curry with your chemistry notes?" The crowd howled. One guy clutched the counter for balance. Someone else snorted beer from their nose. Lindsay grinned like a performer who'd just nailed a set. And then she locked eyes with Priya, standing silently in the doorway, a plastic bag of samosas crumpling in her shaking hands. "Oh my God," Lindsay laughed. "It's just a joke. Lighten up." Priya didn't speak. Not then. Not with all those eyes on her. She backed away, cheeks burning, heart thudding in her throat. In her room, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, fingers clenched into fists. The laughter still rang in her ears. She had worked so hard to survive in this country, to build a life, to speak with confidence, to believe she belonged. And in one moment, Lindsay had reduced all of it to a punchline. Priya's voice cracks slightly as she recalls it for us now. But then it shifts, steadier, sharper. "In that moment, I wanted to disappear. But instead, I made a promise to myself. I would make her eat every word she ever spat at me." Priya was born and raised in New Delhi, the only child of two school teachers who instilled in her a reverence for education and a quiet pride in her roots. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but she was sharp from the time she was young. Priya devoured books, learned how computers worked before most kids her age, and wrote blog posts under a pen name by the time she was 16. When she got a scholarship to attend grad school in the US, it felt like her life was finally about to begin. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. From the moment she landed in the States, Priya had to fight. She worked in the university library, took on tutoring gigs, and sometimes even cleaned classrooms just to afford groceries and textbooks. She enrolled in ESL classes, not because she didn't know English, but because she wanted to soften her accent. Not to erase it, but to gain confidence in a world where she was constantly asked, "Sorry, what did you say?" Her professors quickly saw her potential. She was curious, precise, and deeply passionate about tech ethics and digital equity. It wasn't long before Priya started a podcast, interviewing underrepresented voices in tech. It didn't have a huge following, but those who listened respected her insight. She had hustle, heart, and a growing vision. But despite all of that, she still felt like she was walking through the world with invisible weight strapped to her shoulders. She knew she wasn't like the other girls in her cohort, the ones who didn't have to translate their thoughts before speaking or think twice before raising their hand in a seminar. And then there was Lindsay. Lindsay was everything Priya wasn't. Loud, effortlessly confident, and always surrounded by people. She had grown up in an affluent suburb, the kind of girl who called herself worldly because she once backpacked through Europe. At first, Priya tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the comments began almost immediately. "Your food smells strong. Why do you wear those long skirts? Say Google again. It's so cute. What began as awkward, offhanded remarks became a daily drip of microaggressions. Priya would come home to find Lindsay making fun of Bollywood dance clips she found on Priya's Instagram. Once, Lindsay threw out a spice jar, saying, "That stuff stinks." Priya started eating in her room. She tried brushing it off, even laughing sometimes, telling herself to focus on her goals. She didn't want conflict. She didn't want to seem sensitive. And besides, Lindsay was well-liked, quick with a joke, always smiling in group chats. The kind of person who could insult you and make everyone else laugh while doing it. So Priya stayed silent. She kept her head down. She buried the hurt. In her podcast scripts, in late-night editing sessions, in walks around the neighborhood where she rehearsed lines, she never had the courage to say out loud, but inside, something was changing. The humiliation of being mocked was no longer just a bruise. It was a spark. Priya wasn't going to lash out. She wasn't going to scream or cry or beg to be seen. She was going to outwork, outshine, and outsmart her, and when the time came, she would take back her voice and make Lindsay listen. It started with hope. After months of quietly grinding away on her podcast, interviewing indie developers, writing sharp, thoughtful analysis, Priya finally caught a break. A producer from a well-known podcast network had reached out after hearing one of her episodes. They were launching a new vertical focused on emerging tech voices, and they invited her to pitch a segment. Priya was breathless. This wasn't just exposure. It was validation, a foot in the door to something bigger. As she poured everything into the pitch. The segment was called Silicon Ghosts a deep dive into how immigrant coders often build the backbone of major startups, only to be erased from the company story once the product goes mainstream. It was personal, powerful, and rooted in her lived experience. She even included a quote from one of her own episodes. Some of us weren't born with microphones. We had to build them ourselves. One night, while editing in the living room, she shared her excitement with Lindsay. She even read her the script, nerves bubbling as she spoke aloud the lines she hoped might change her life. Lindsay barely looked up from her phone but nodded. "Cool. You're getting pretty good at this," she muttered 2 days later. Over cereal, Lindsay casually mentioned a friend who'd just landed a podcast feature. "It's about immigrant engineers or whatever. Sounds like something you'd do." "Wild, right?" Priya blinked. "Which network?" Lindsay shrugged. "I think the one you mentioned. The one with the purple logo." A knot formed in Priya's chest. She excused herself, raced to her laptop, and pulled up the network site. There it was. Silicon Ghosts. Same title, same teaser quote. But the byline? Lindsay Spencer. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She clicked through, praying it was some cosmic coincidence. But as the teaser played, she heard it. Words. Research. Even one of her interview clips, stripped of context and reduced to a soundbite. She confronted Lindsay immediately, heart pounding. Lindsay didn't flinch. "Oh my God, Priya, chill. It was just an idea. You read it to me. It wasn't, like, copyrighted or anything. You don't own words." Priya stared at her, stunned. "You stole my work." Lindsay rolled her eyes. "Jesus, you're so dramatic. This is why you'll never make it big. You take everything so personally." Priya didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked to her room, locked the door, and sat in the dark for an hour. The silence louder than any insult. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the way Lindsay dismissed her As if Priya didn't matter. As if her voice, her story, her asterisk existence asterisk was just a joke to be recycled for clicks and clout. And that's when it clicked. Lindsay would never stop. Because people like Lindsay don't stop unless someone makes them. Priya stared at her empty microphone. And she began to plan. Priya didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even tell Lindsay she'd been right about one thing. That Priya wasn't built for the spotlight. Not asterisk that asterisk kind of spotlight. What Lindsay didn't realize was that some revolutions begin in silence. And Priya was ready to start hers. She began watching. Not just Lindsay's social media, but asterisk Lindsay herself asterisk. The curated feed of Fox diversity, social justice buzzwords, and support all voices captions, all while stealing the very story of the immigrant woman she shared a roof with. Priya noticed the cracks immediately. A post about climate justice the same week Lindsay ordered hundreds of dollars of fast fashion. A tweet about elevating brown voices, while unfollowing every South Asian creator who dared question her. And Priya realized something crucial. Lindsay's identity wasn't built on truth. It was built on perception. And perception could be destroyed. That night, Priya dusted off her mic. She created a new podcast under a pseudonym, *Kavya*, a name from her grandmother's poetry collection. She kept her face hidden, branding sleek and minimal, voice altered slightly for privacy. With help from a friend who worked in sound engineering, she launched *Unspoken Roots*, a series about immigrant voices, accents, and the cost of code switching. The irony was sharp and satisfying. Every episode was a scalpel. She interviewed women from Bangladesh, Ghana, Vietnam. Their stories echoed hers. About being mocked, muted, misunderstood. About the pain of losing your native tongue to survive in another world. Meanwhile, Lindsay's big segment aired. Priya sat quietly in the living room as Lindsay played it on full blast. It was flat, forced. Her voice lacked conviction. Her inflection was awkward, like someone reading a script they didn't understand. Online comments rolled in quickly. Feels performative. Does she even know what she's talking about? This sounds like a parody of immigrant stories. Priya said nothing. But that night, Lindsay stomped around the apartment, passive-aggressively slamming cabinet doors, blaming her editor, her producer, even the mic quality. She never once considered that maybe the voice wasn't the problem. It was the fact that it wasn't hers to begin with. Then something shifted. Lindsay started copying Priya again. She took photos of Priya's food and posted them without credit. She started wearing bindis and draping scarves over outfits, calling it a vibe. She even practiced pronouncing chai correctly, something she once mocked Priya for. But Priya didn't mind. She let her dig. Because *Unspoken Roots* was rising. Quietly, virally, beautifully, her email inbox filled with messages from young immigrants saying, "Thank you for making me feel seen." A cultural magazine asked to feature the anonymous host. A tech incubator offered funding for a mini documentary series. And then, the moment everything changed, she got a call from a major media network. They were hosting a special live broadcast about underrepresented voices in podcasting. *Unspoken Roots* had been nominated for a National Audio Journalism Award, and they wanted the creator to appear on camera. Priya sat frozen at her desk, phone still to her ear. This was the chance, not just to step forward, but to speak. For herself, as herself, but doing so meant the mask would come off. And when it did, Lindsay would see who really built the house she was trying to live in. Priya smiled. For the first time, not with fear, but with fire. I accept, she said. Priya sat beneath the studio lights, a calm resolve washing over her as the camera rolled. Her earrings, delicate silver jumkas, caught the light with every word. She wore them not for fashion, but for history. Her accent, once softened out of fear, rang through with deliberate clarity. When the anchor asked what inspired the accent of power Priya didn't flinch. I used to be mocked for how I spoke, she said, even by people I trusted. They made my voice the punchline, and for a long time, I believed them. That to be respected, I had to erase myself. But that's the lie we're taught. The truth is, our voices carry generations. And mine? It was never the problem. Their ears were. The room was silent, gripped. Priya's gaze met the camera lens, unwavering. So I made a podcast for every girl who's been told she needed to be quieter, clearer, whiter. We don't need translation. We need amplification. The anchor nodded solemnly. We're honored to spotlight Priya Mehra, whose podcast, The Accent of Power has helped thousands reclaim their voice. The segment ended, but the fire had only begun. Within hours, the clip spread across TikTok, Twitter, and podcast forums. Comments flooded in. This gave me chills. I see myself in her. Finally, someone said it. In their apartment, Lindsay watched the interview from the couch, slack-jawed, wine glass trembling in her hand, her face drained of color as Priya's name and podcast flashed across the screen. Then came the storm. Reddit threads surfaced, exposing the roommate who stole Priya Mehra's pitch. Screenshots emerged, old group chats, leaked by a mutual friend. There was Lindsay, mocking Priya's pronunciation, joking about taking her idea for a spin, calling her Bollywood Barbie, even mimicking her pitch lines and asking if they could really be stolen if no one important said them first. The backlash was swift. Lindsay's podcast deal was pulled. Sponsors backed out. Her social media turned into a battlefield. Followers demanding accountability, apology, explanation. She panicked. Priya's phone buzzed that night. Lindsay text. Hey, I know things got messy. Can we maybe talk? I'm getting death threats. Please help clear the air. You know I didn't mean to hurt you. Priya stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed slowly. Funny how loud my voice sounds now, isn't it? She hit send. Then muted the conversation. Not blocked. Muted. Because Lindsay didn't deserve the satisfaction of silence. She deserved to listen. Priya's life transformed. In ways she hadn't dared to imagine. Invitations poured in. Universities asked her to speak about voice bias and identity. Major publications requested op-eds. And she was brought on as a consultant for a new documentary exploring language discrimination in global media. Her inbox was a flood of messages from listeners who'd felt invisible their entire lives, finally hearing themselves reflected in her words. But more than the accolades, it was the quiet shifts that meant the most. She found herself speaking more freely, more fully, even at coffee shops, in elevators, with strangers. No longer shrinking or softening syllables to soothe someone else's discomfort. She began answering questions about her accent with pride instead of apology. It's Indian English, she'd say simply, smiling. Beautiful, isn't it? One night, she sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of her new apartment. A bright, open space filled with warm textiles, artwork from Delhi, and little tokens from her childhood. She no longer shared a kitchen with anyone who made fun of her food. She no longer had to brace herself before speaking. Her podcast studio sat in the corner by a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city skyline. She turned on the mic, adjusting it slowly, deliberately, then hit record. Her voice filled the space. This is Asterisk, the accent of power asterisk. And today's episode is called What They Mocked Made Me. She paused. For a long time, I thought my voice was something to fix, something broken, too foreign, too awkward, to me. But the truth is, what they mocked gave me purpose. What they laughed at became the reason thousands listened. What they dismissed became my superpower. She sat back, letting the recorder roll, the city glowing behind her. Priya didn't just reclaim her voice. She built a platform on it and made it unshakable. Priya sits beneath soft studio lighting, her shoulders relaxed, her expression calm, but unwavering. The camera zooms in slowly as she leans forward, looking directly into the lens, not just at the interviewer, but through the screen, as if speaking to every person who has ever felt small for simply being who they are. They said my voice didn't belong here, that I'd never be taken seriously, that I had to sound like them to matter. And for a long time, I believed them. I lowered my volume. I clipped my vowels. I laughed when they joked about the way I spoke, just to keep the peace. She takes a quiet breath, not shaky, not uncertain, but full of the kind of strength that comes from choosing yourself again and again. But I didn't need to change to be worthy. I needed to stop waiting for permission to be loud, to be proud, to take up space in the language that shaped me. Behind her, a waveform glows on the screen, the recording of her own voice, steady and bold. Priya lets the silence stretch for a moment before delivering her final words. Soft and seismic, they tried to bury me under shame, but I spoke, and the whole world listened. Fade to black.